Hi, I'm Michael Reach, and I'm going to talk about the Jewish calendar and how it is calculated, and actually go through the calculations for this year's calendar. Let me give you a quick introduction. Achodesh hazeh lachem. The Torah says that our calendar is set by the moon. Each month begins with the appearance of the new moon. The time from one astronomical new moon to the next is about 29.5 days. Not exactly. The Torah also says, B'chodesh ha'aviv, the calendar is set by the sun. Pesach must be in the spring. Sukkot is Chag HaOsif, the ingathering festival. It must be in the fall. To keep pace with the sun, a year has to be about 365.25 days. Again, not exactly. These two times are independent and unrelated. Any fixed calendar that uses both of them is going to get out of sync. For the first half of Jewish history, the solution was fix it by hand in the Sanhedrin. Witnesses who saw the new moon would come to testify. If they saw the new moon by the 29th, that would be Rosh Chodesh. Otherwise, the 30th would be Rosh Chodesh. A lunar month is about 29.5 days, so each happened around half the time. They would also decide whether to add an extra month of Adar each year, if it looked like it wouldn't be spring before Pesach. Since a solar year, 365 odd days, is around 11 days longer than the lunar month, that would happen every 2 or 3 years or so. The system was self-correcting, but as long as they did it that way, no one could know ahead of time what that year's calendar would look like. But near the end of the time of the Gemara, it became impractical to do it this way. So one of the Nesiim, Hillel ben Yehuda, set up a permanent system instead, done by calculation instead of direct observation. He established every month's Rosh Chodesh and every year's Rosh Hashanah until the end of time. As I said before, such a calendar cannot be exact. But Chazal did as accurate a job as was needed. It has drifted only a few days in the more than 1,000 years since. It will be close enough till Be'ezras Hashem we have another Sanhedrin. Here are some good references on the subject, starting with the Rambam and the Tur. My own interest began when I went to a shir by Rav David Hever at Ner Yisro more than 2 decades ago. Since then, I always wanted to sit down and work out next year's calendar using all the rules he taught, but never quite got around to it. Finally, I did it in 2019, 5779, and this year was the second time. So let me first tell a story. Then I'll give a quick overview of the steps that we're going to follow. So here's the story. Rav Schlanger used to tell this about his father and the Satmar Rav Aleichem HaShalom. The Satmar Rav was in the concentration camps, Lo Aleinu, long enough that he didn't know what next year's calendar would be. He knew the system, but he wanted someone to check his work. So he found Rav Schlanger's father, who was a mathematician. They worked it out together. Forever after, the Rav would stand up for Rav Schlanger's father, saying that he had saved his Yomim Tovim. So this is very practical halacha. Usually, of course, one can just buy a luach. Okay, let's begin the overview, choosing the right calendar for the year. So first, we need to decide if this is a regular year, a peshuta, or a leap year, a me'uberes. As I said, the months need to track the cycles of the moon, and the years must track the seasons of the year. We'll need an extra month sometimes to stay in sync. Chazal set up a repeating cycle of regular and leap years. The siman to remember that is Guach Adazat. We'll explain it. And we'll know which kind of year it is from the number of the year. Next step. Find the time, the molad for this Tishrei. That's the astronomical moment for that new moon. Actually, astronomical months aren't all quite the same length, but you can approximate it by the average time from one new moon to the next. Chazal estimated that time to within a second. The siman for it is Aleph Yud Beis, Tafshin Sadi Gimel. We'll learn what that means. Then we'll just count how many months since creation. Multiply by that amount of time per month, and that yields the moment of the molad we want. It's not a day. It's an exact time within a day. Then do it again for the next Tishrei, at the end of this year. Just add 12 more months, or 13 for a leap year, Mu'beres. You get to the molad for the following year. Again, a moment in time, not a day of the week. Once we have those, we need to find the days of Rosh Hashanah at the beginning and the end of the year. The day of Rosh Hashanah is not always the same day as the molad. These are calculated using what's called the Arba Dechiyos, the 4 Dechiyos. It's 4 reasons why Rosh Hashanah might be moved to the next day or even the day after that. Okay, now we have the days of Rosh Hashanah. These are now days on the calendar, not a moment in time, like Monday or Tuesday. From the 2 Rosh Hashanahs, we now know the length of the year. Short, medium, or long, Chasera, Kisidra, or Shlema. That fact, plus the starting day, plus knowing whether it's a regular or a leap year, completely determines the calendar. Turns out there's a total of only 14 possible. Instead of an infinite number of possible instants for the new moon, we identified our calendar as one from a list of 14. At this point, we're really done, because Chazal already worked out all the details of each of those 14. There's a handy chart in the Tur. We have a few more steps to go, but from here on, all we'll be doing is following the steps that Chazal already did. Next step, we now know the total number of days in the year from one Rosh Hashanah till the next. We use that to figure out the length of each of the months to fit that total. That gives us the days of Rosh Chodesh for each month, and all the Yomim Tovim, which have particular days in a month in the calendar. Once we have that, we can figure out the Torah readings. We count how many Shabbos have weekly readings, and we'll miss some because a Yom Tov falls on Shabbos. That'll tell us how many Parshios need to be doubled up, and Chazal gave us some principles for how that's done, how they decided which are the ones they double up. You can actually get different results in Eretz Yisrael and in Chutz La'aretz. That happened this year. The last step to do is to connect the calendar to the English, the Gregorian calendar. We're actually just going to describe how this step is done, not actually work it out. Okay, now that we've finished the overview, let's begin the process of actually doing all the steps to choose the right calendar. The first step is deciding if this year is a regular or a leap year. There's a 19-year cycle. It contains 12 regular years and 7 leap years. That's a total of 235 months. Turns out that the time for 235 months is very close to the time for 19 solar years. Not exact, as I said. So to find our place in that cycle, take the number of the year, 5780 this year, divide by 19 and take the remainder. This time the remainder is 4. So this is the 4th year of the cycle. Call that Daled. The siman for the leap years is Guach Adazat. That means that the 3rd year and the 6th year and the 8th year, the 11th, the 14th, 17th, and 19th are leap years, Mu'ubaros. Well, Daled is not on the list. This year is a pshuta, a regular year. Okay, the next step is to calculate the molad. We're going to do it for Tishrei of this year and next year. But first, we've got to learn how the calculations are done. Chazal used three numbers to identify a time of a molad. A day, 1 through 7, Shabbos is 7, an hour, and a chelik. One chelik is 3 1/3 seconds, 1,080 halakim in an hour. All of our calculations will use this triplet. One quirk is that the hours are measured from 6 p.m. A Jewish day begins at nightfall. However, most halachas in the Torah use shos zmanios, which are a fraction of the time of daylight, from sunrise to sunset or to darkness. Here we aren't doing that at all. These are clock times, 24 hours in a day, starting at 6 p.m., regardless of when the sun sets. So 6 p.m., that's called 0. Measuring forward, 12 p.m., midnight is 6. 6 a.m. dawn is 12, and noon is called 18. We could also count the days in the week, but it will turn out that Chazal set up the calendar in such a way that we don't need to worry about them at all. No weeks. This is kind of amazing. It'll be enough for us to know the time of the molad within the week. We'll just ignore how many weeks it is. So let's just do a quick example of these kinds of calculations. Say you want to add these two times together when you're multiplying it all out and adding it all up. So you add up the halakim. In this case, 443 plus 742 would be 1185. Since that's more than an hour, so I'll subtract off 1080. I'm left with 105 halakim, and then I carry the 1. Carry it over to the hours. Now 18 hours plus 20 hours plus the 1 I carried, 39 hours. That's a day. So carry the 1, and I'm left with 15 hours. The days is 4 days plus 5 days plus the 1 I carried is 10, which is 3 if you ignore the weeks. So the result of this addition will be 3, 15, 105, which is Gimel, Tes, Vav, Kuf, Hey in Chazal's notation. That's how you do all of these. Just keep carrying from the halakim up to the hours, up to the days, and then up to the weeks, which you drop. Okay, let's see how to do this. We're going to need the time of Tishrei's new moon this year. How many months total have there been till then since creation? So you take the starting point of the calendar, add the time for however many months there have been, and you figure out the day of the week and the time of the day as a result. There have been thousands of weeks, 2, of course, but we aren't going to need to know them. Again, this was Chazal's design to simplify things. We could count up all those months. It'll be easier to break the job into pieces. How many 19-year cycles? How many leftover regular years and how many leftover leap years? What did I mean by the starting point? Don't you just start at 0? Turns out that the beginning of the calendar is indeed near the beginning of year 1, but not at time 0. It starts at what's called Baharad. Monday, the basis for 2, the second day of the week. 5 hours, that's the Hey, which is 11 p.m., and 204 halakim. That's the starting point. What in the world is that? It's an imaginary time. It's before the world was created. The world was actually created 6 days before the end of year 1. This is almost a year before that. The truth is that the calendar was really set up in the time of the Gemara, somewhere around 4200, let's say. Chazal could have picked a starting point from then, and when the molad was then, and gone forward. But then you'd have had to subtract 4200 or whatever from whenever you did the calculations. Instead, they tracked the calendar backwards in time to simplify the calculations, even though we know that the calendar wasn't really in use all that time at all. The new moon was established whenever it actually appeared, according to the Sanhedrin. So Baharad is the result of tracking backward in time. It just results from whenever they actually started. But it is neat that if you move forward one Pshuta, one regular year from then, from Baharad, you actually get Friday morning of Tishrei the next year, which is the very beginning of year 2, the morning of the day that Adam HaRishon was created. Again, we're going to need to count up all the time from all the months since creation, but it's easier to break it up into pieces. How many 19-year cycles have there been? How many leftover regular years, and how many leftover leap years? Each of those shifts the time forward, moves the time forward from the starting point a bunch of weeks, and what we really want, which is how many days, hours, and halakha. So first, how much does 1 month move time forward? 1 lunar month is Aleph Yud Beis Taf Shin Tzadi Gimel. That's 1 day. It's really 29 days, but we're going to ignore the weeks. 12 hours, 793 halakha. Remember I told you that a lunar month is 29 and a half days approximately. So you take 12 of those and you get a Shana Pshuta, a regular year. Dalet Ches, Taf Taf Ayin Vav. It's 4 days, 8 hours, 876 halakha. And a Mu'beres, that's 13 of those months. It's 5 days, 21 hours, 589 halakha. And take 7 leap years and 12 regular years and add all those up, 19-year cycle, you get 2 days, 16 hours, 595 halakha. Beis Yud Vav, Taf Kuf Tzadi Hey. Each of these tells us how far the molad moves after that many months. We're not going to keep the weeks. We worked out each of these standard amounts once and for all. Then we find out how many of each of them we need, and we add it all up. Keep carrying. Okay. Does everyone have your pencil and paper handy? Well, I'm sorry. You're not going to need them. So you don't need to do this yourself. I'm including a calculator. You put the year in at the top, the molad shows at the bottom. If you change the month, you can get the molad for announcements in shuls too. You can change the pieces below by hand. Number of 19-year cycles, regular and leap years, extra months too. Okay, we need to do that for Tishrei of this year and the next. If you don't feel like using the calculator, this is how the calculations would look. So we'll begin with the starting point, Baharad. Then we find the number of 19-year cycles. So we divide 5780 by 19. You get 304 19-year cycles. So 304 times the time shift for one of them, Beis Yud Vav Taf Kuf Tzadi Hey, and you multiply all that out, the result turns out to be 515, 520. Now, using our Siman Guach Adazat, let's see. We said this is the 4th year of the cycle, so years 1 and 2 were Pshutos, and then Gimel was Mu'beres. So there's 2 times Pshutos and 1 time a Mu'beres year. So we find the shift for each of those, and we add them all up, keep carrying, and you get, as a total, for that, 715, 181. Now you take the grand total of all of these for this year's molad. Comes out to be 111, 905. That's Sunday, 11 hours, etc. Of course, if you'd want the molad for a different month, to announce the molad in shul, you'd add in those additional months as well. Okay, we need to do this repeated for next year's Tishrei as well. So we'll either add 12 more months or 13 more months for a leap year. Next year's result this time, when you've done that, is 5/20/701. That's Thursday and 20 hours, etc. It's an exact time somewhere in the day. Okay, it's time to find the actual days of Rosh Hashanah. We'll use the system called the Arba Techiyos. We need to find the day of the week for each of the two Rosh Hashanahs. For sure, it's often on the same day as the Molad falls, but not always. For this year, that would have put it on Sunday. That's the 1/11/905 we calculated above. And it would have been on Thursday for next year, from the 5/20/701. There are those 4 dechiyas, 4 situations where those days can be nidche, pushed off, moved later. And this is pretty common. Let's see when it happens. The 4 dechiyas are called Molad Zaken, Lo Adu Rosh, Gat Rad, and Betu Takpat. They all move Rosh Hashanah later. It never moves backwards. Let's go through them. Molad Zaken. This means is the Molad after Chatzos, afternoon. That's 18 hours in our system measuring from 6 p.m. This is based on a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. If it is afternoon, don't make Rosh Hashanah that day. Make it the next day. Let's see, this year, 11 hours, that's not more than 18, so we won't move it. But next year, 20, that's more than 18. So that one's going to move from Thursday to Friday. That's Molad Zaken. Move it forward if it's afternoon. Let's see if it stays there though. Okay, Lo Adu Rosh. You do this with the result of the first Dechiyah. We do these in order. So Adu is 1, 4, 6. That's Sunday, Wednesday, Friday. We don't allow Rosh Hashanah on those days. Why not? That's a Gemara. If Rosh Hashanah were on those days, Yom Kippur would be next to Shabbos. We couldn't cook for 2 days in a row. That's bad. Or Hoshana Rabbah would be on Shabbos. We couldn't do Hoshanas. So instead, we move Rosh Hashanah to the next day, and by now we may have moved Rosh Hashanah for 2 full days. For this year, we said this year's Rosh Hashanah was going to be on Sunday. That's not allowed. It moves up to Monday. Next year's was going to be on Friday after the Molad Zaken moved it already. Also not allowed. It moves on to Shabbos. It's gone 2 days forward. There are 2 more dechiyas. The last 2 are a little more subtle and a little more rare. They have to do with the length of the year. Chazal didn't allow just any length of the year. They only allowed 3 lengths: short, medium, and long. Chasera is 1 day shorter, Kisidra, and Shlema is 1 day longer. By comparing the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah so far, we could tell how long the year is going to be. We talked above about the shift in the Molad for a regular year, which was 4 days, 8 plus hours. But the real calendar, that's actually days, not hours in Chalakim. So Chazal allowed a short Chasera year of 353 days, which would be a shift of 3 days from one Rosh Hashanah to the next. 350 is an even number of weeks, leaves over 3 days. A regular Kisidra year of 354 days with a shift of 4 days from one to the next, and a long Shlema year, 355 days, with a shift of 5 days, which would be, say, from a Monday to Shabbos a year later. No other lengths are allowed. Okay, what about a leap year? It has a Molad shift of 5 days and a little more than 21 hours. So again, Chazal allowed 3 lengths. A Chasera is 383 days, that's a shift of 5 days in the week, like say from Monday to Shabbos. A Kisidra is 384, which is a 6-day shift. And a Shlema is 385, a 7-day shift. What that really means is that both Rosh Hashanahs end up on the same day of the week. Again, no other lengths allowed. So here's a summary. You can see now why we don't need to worry about the weeks. That's the easy part to figure out. The days is what really tells us what kind of year it is. Okay, we're ready now to explain those last two Dechiyos. The first one is Gat Rad. After those first two Dechiyos, you might have moved the end of the year too far, a stretched year. If the year ends up longer than a Shlema, it's not allowed. The way you'd have to fix it is to move the first Rosh Hashanah forward as well to catch up. If you look at all the cases, that turns out that doesn't happen often. It only happens in one special case. Has to be a regular year, the Molad on Tuesday, and has to fall after 9 hours, 204 Chalakim. That's Gat Rad. Gimel for Tuesday, test for 9 hours, etc. In that case, next year's Rosh Hashanah turns out to move 2 days forward, and the year ends up too long. So this Rosh Hashanah will need to move from Tuesday to Wednesday. But it's not allowed to be on Wednesday either, Lo Adu Rosh, so it also ends up moving 2 days to Thursday. This could also happen if the Rosh Hashanah next year is a Gat Rad. But then it would be because the year after that is the Pshuta. Could happen to either Rosh Hashanah. This is not all that common. It last happened in 5772. The last Dechiyah is in the reverse direction. The first Rosh Hashanah moved forward too far. The year got squished, it's too short. This time you need to fix it by moving the second Rosh Hashanah forward 1 day to stretch the year a little bit. Again, it only happens in one case, only in a leap year, and only when the second Molad is Batu Takpat on a Monday after 15 hours, 589 Chalakim. The second Rosh Hashanah gets pushed forward to make the year a little longer, from Monday to Tuesday. This could also happen to the first Rosh Hashanah getting moved forward because of last year. Last year is the one that would need to be Mu'averes in that case. This one is really rare. It last happened in 5766 and will never happen again before the year 6000. Okay, now we finally have the final date for Rosh Hashanah for this year and next year. This time it comes out the year turned out to be a regular Peshuta year. The first Rosh Hashanah moved once and ended up on Monday. The second one moved twice and ended up on Shabbos. There's a total shift of 5 days, the maximum for a Pshuta, so this year is long, a Shlema. Now that we have the days of Rosh Hashanah, we're able to choose the correct calendar for this year. Let's see how we do that. There are actually only 14 possible calendars. 7 for Peshutos, 7 for Mu'ubaros. The Tur, Orach Chaim, Tov Chaf Ches, 428, has a wonderful chart that illustrates this. Each calendar is in a different column, with the Pshutos on one side and the Mu'ubaros on the other. We'll see these 2-letter names at the top of the columns again. These are simonim that identify the different years. You'll see that the tourist chart goes through every single detail of each of the calendars. When are the Rosh Chodashim, the Yomim Tovim, and at the very bottom, which are the doubled Parshios. As I said before, once we know which calendar, we're really done, because Chazal already worked out every single detail of each of them. I made a slightly fancier version of the tourist chart, which I'll be using for this year. The tour only showed important dates for reasons of space, because this one, I'll call it the Kaviyas page, is a web page. It can actually show all the days of the year, dividing it into weeks. Each Shabbos in blue shows the Torah reading for that week. The big numbers in black are the days of the month, Yomim Tovim, or in red. You can move right to see the Peshutos, or left to see the Mulubaros, just like the tourist chart. You can see that the years begin staggered on different days of Rosh Hashanah of the week. If you want, you can line them up to start together. And then the Shabbos are staggered. For convenience, these buttons on the right let us move to specific places in the year. Finally, on the left, it has a list of the Parshios, along with noting the ones that can be doubled up, like Vayakel Pekudei. You can see that I had fun making it, which is probably why I'm wasting your time telling you about it, but we will be using it for the rest of this year. Okay, let's decide which calendar is ours. First, choose the correct side, Pshuta or Mu'beres. Then pick the right one of the 7. The first letter in the siman at the top represents the day of the week for that Rosh Hashanah. The second letter in the siman is which kind of year it is. Short Chasera, normal Kesidra, or long Shalema. So let's see. This year we know is a regular year. Okay, we said the initial Rosh Hashanah would be on Monday. That's base, so it's going to be one of these two. And we said that it was a Shlema, a long year, so that's this Shin. This second one from the right is our calendar, base, Shin, Hey. We'll see about the Hey later. We can scroll down now and see everything about our year. The Arba Sha'arim. The last 20 slides or so were actually turned into a single step by Chazal. The Gaonim described a way to take care of the Dalet Dechiyos automatically, to go from the Molad of Tishrei to the exact calendar. All you need to know is the Molad, and which from last year, this year, and next year are leap years. And then this really neat chart tells you the answer. Let's do it for this year. This is the 4th year in the 19-year cycle. It's called Mem Pei Pei because last year was Muberes, and this year and next year are Peshutos. Mem Pei Pei. Then you look up the time of the Molad of Tishrei, which was, we saw was 1/11/905. You find its place on the chart. In this case, it's a little below the line above 1 day, 20 hours, 491 Chalakim. Then you go straight across, and you can see that we're in our year of base Shin He. The chart is interesting because as you move down, that is, as the Molad moves forward through the days of the week, you can see where the transitions are from one calendar to another. That's these lines in the middle. So all the Dalet Dechiyos are included in this one chart as various transitions at particular times. Now that we have chosen our calendar, we are ready to place all the Yomim Tovim on the calendar too. Then we'll be able to work out the Sidras, the weekly Torah readings. Let's start by establishing the lengths of each of the months, which will also give us Rosh Chodesh for each month. Months come in 2 lengths, Chaser and Mole. The first day of the next month is always Rosh Chodesh. But if the month is long, Mole, this month adds a 30th day which is also Rosh Chodesh. The months need to add up to the right length of the year, as we've seen. 353 through 355 for a Pshuta year, 383 through 385 for a Milberes. How do we arrange that? Most months are always the same length. They mostly alternate. Tishrei long, Teves short, Shavat long, Adar short, Nisan long, Iyar short, Sivan long, Tammuz short, Av long, Elul short, always. A leap year has 2 months of Adar, again alternating. Adar Rishon is long, Adar Sheni is short. These are all fixed, they never change. I skipped 2 months, Cheshvan and Kislev, back to back. Those months can be either long or short. That's where we can get a Chasera year, both of them are short, or a Shlema when both of them are long. In a Kisidra year, Cheshvan is short and Kislev is long, which fits the alternating pattern. This year, it's a regular year, and it's a Shlema. So the sequence is long, 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 that's Cheshvan and Kislev, short, long, just one Adar which is short, long, short, long, short, long, and then Elul is short. Add them all up, the total is 355 days. A Pshuta, which is a Shlema. We've got all the months now with Rosh Chodesh. So, we get the Yomim Tovim too. Most of them just have a fixed date. Shavuos is always on the 6th of Sivan, etc. There are a couple of interesting special cases. First, since Kislev might be long or short, the Rosh Chodesh at the end of Kislev might be 1 day or 2. That means the 8 days of Hanukkah might end on the 2nd or the 3rd of Teves. The other special case is that fast days get pushed forward if they fall on Shabbos. For example, Tisha B'Av gets pushed to the 10th if the 9th falls on Shabbos. On this year's calendar, let's see where our Yomim Tovim fall. So this year, let's look at Rosh Chodesh Teves. It's 2 days long, a long Kislev. So Hanukkah is going to end on the 2nd of Teves instead of the 3rd like some others. You can also see that the fast days, like Tisha B'Av, don't fall on Shabbos and don't get pushed off. That's true for all of them. We've seen that the calendars only vary in 3 details. Are Cheshvan and Kislev long or short? And are there 2 months of Adar? And of course, also, what day did the year start? But all the variability within the calendar is confined to that 5-month period from the end of Cheshvan to the beginning of the last Adar. The whole rest of the calendar, from then on till the beginning of the next Cheshvan of the next year, is all a rigid unit. It'll move because the day of that Rosh Hashanah varies in which day of the week, but it all moves together. If you know the day of the week of any day in that span, you know all the rest too. The Tur gives a neat mnemonic for this that uses Atbash, matching the beginning and the end of the alphabet. If we know the day of the week for the first day of Pesach, Aleph, that's the same day of the week as Tisha B'Av, Tav. Second day of Pesach, Beis, same as Shavuos, Shin. Gimel, same as Rosh Hashanah, Reish. Those are pretty good. Daled, it's the same as Simchas Torah, Kriyas HaTorah with a kuf, getting a little harder. Hey, same as Tzom Kippur, Tzadi. And Vav, same as Purim, Hey, That's the Purim right before that Pesach. Remember those three-letter titles for the calendars on my Kivius webpage? They're in common use since the time of the tour. I didn't tell you yet what that last letter of the title was. This year was Beis Shin Hey. What's the Hey? The base was the day it begins, Rosh Hashanah, at the beginning of the year. Shin means Shlema, a long year. But what's the Hey? Well, that's the day of the week when the first day of Pesach falls. You could figure that out from the first two, of course. We've done that for all the Yom Tovim. But it is convenient. According to the Atbash Simon of the tour, knowing the first day of Pesach tells you about many other important days as well. So for this year, if we follow that second column and just scroll down or click the button for Pesach, we can see that Pesach indeed begins on a Thursday, 2 days before Shabbos. So Beis Shin Hey, the Hey is Thursday. We have placed our Yom Tovim. It's time to place the Torah readings, the Sidros. We're almost done. Now placing the Sidros should be easy. They're all in order. 3 things make it more complicated. The first is the Yom Tovim. Major Yom Tovim, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, all the days of Sukkot and Pesach, Shavuos, they have their own laning, and the weekly Sidra doesn't get read at all, waits for next week. Also, depending on when they start, Sukkot and Pesach contain 1 Shabbos or 2. Now you just count. How many weekly Torah readings total will there be that year? It depends on when the year starts and ends, and if Yom Tovim get in the way. Go through the whole year and count up the available slots. The number of Sidros is always 54. The last one, the Zos HaBracha, is not really a weekly Sidra. You read it on Simchas Torah, not as a Shabbos Parsha. So 53, to go into however many available slots there are for them, how many weekly Torah readings. Some usually need to be doubled up to get the count right. In some regular years, like this one, every possible one is doubled. A leap year has around 4 more weeks than a regular year, so it will have several fewer doubled parshios. A leap year can sometimes have none doubled at all. Chazal picked those sidros which can be doubled. But how do they decide which ones actually are for each calendar? Seems like you could choose any of them as long as it's the right number. They did this in stages, in benchmarks, certain important points in the year. They decided what they wanted to get to by then. From one benchmark to the next is a certain number of weeks and a certain number of days. 1 week, 1 Torah reading. As for the extra days, it'll depend whether an extra Shabbos falls in those days or not. The third complication is Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, they keep a 1-day Yom Tov, and in Chutz La'aretz they keep a 2-day Yom Tov. So if the second day of Yom Tov falls on Shabbos, they'll be doing the regular Parsha in Eretz Yisrael, and the Yom Tov laning in Chutz La'aretz, and they just got out of sync. Eretz Yisrael will be a week ahead and stay that way, until at some point Chutz La'aretz has a double Parsha, and Eretz Yisrael not. Let's scroll down the calendar for this year and see where the Sedras get pushed aside for Yom Tovim and how many are doubled to fit. This year is Beis Shin Hey. It's a regular year. The only Yom Tovim that fall on Shabbos this year is next year's Rosh Hashanah, right here. It's a little hard to see. And the second day of Shavuos, in Chutz La'aretz. We'll get a week behind at that point in Chutz La'aretz. They'll read Parshas Naso, and we're going to stay a week behind for quite a while. Till here. We'll read Chukas Balak, and they're going to read just Parshas Balak, and then we're going to catch up. It turns out that this year in Chutz La'aretz, we're going to need every single double parsha. Here's Matas Maaseh. Okay, let's see how following the benchmarks on the parshios works. The benchmarks are beginning of the year, then there's a long stretch from there until Pesach, then Shavuos, and then Tisha B'Av. By then, everything is always all caught up. All the calendars are in sync. But there's one more tweak that happens by Nitzavim Vayelech. In the old days, before there was a fixed calendar, they often wouldn't know if a year was a leap year until Adar. In keeping with that, no Sidros are combined before Adar. Vayalka Pekudei is the first pair. A regular Pshuta year has about 4 weeks it needs to catch up to the Mubaros. So in a Mubaros, all the first 4 pairs, Vayalka Pekudei, Tazria Mitzara, Achrei, Mos Kedoshim, Bahar B'chu Kosai, are never combined. But that's quite a ways along, way after Pesach. The regular years won't really catch up till around Shavuos. So let's take a look. Here's Purim. We still haven't gotten to our first double parshias. That's down here. In a Mubaros year, Purim is still a month away. We aren't going to double up Vayalka Pekudei anyhow. Let me line them up by Pesach instead. As we've seen from the Torah's Atbash, that's a good way to sync up the rest of the year. And the Pshutos and Mubaros won't be a month apart anymore. You see that the Pshutos are still a couple of weeks behind the Mubaros by the time you get to Pesach. They do mostly catch up by Shavuos. See, they're all up to Bamidbar. Most of the Mubaros are Bamidbar, a couple are up to Naso. Let's look at Pesach again, the next benchmark. For a Pshuta, Parshat Tzav is always right before Pesach. We usually needed to double Vayalka Pekudei to do that. A leap year has 4 extra Shabboses, no double parshios before Pesach. And you still get to Mitzara or Acharei Mos before Pesach, way ahead. From Pesach to Shavuos is exactly 6 Shabboses. There's no weekly parsha during Pesach. In that time, the regular years catch up. You have Tazria Mitzara, Acharei Mos Kedoshim, and then Bahar B'chu Kosai. Everybody gets to Bamidbar before Shavuos. But there are some Mubaros, the ones that start with a Hey, they got to Acharei Mos before Pesach, so they can't help. Even though there's no double parshas, they can't help getting to Naso before Shavuos. By Tisha B'Av, we always catch up completely. All the calendars reach Devarim before Tisha B'Av. Devarim is 10 Sidros after Bamidbar, and there may be 8 or 9 Shabboses in between. So we'd need to combine 1 or 2 sets of Sidros. If you need 2, it's Chukas Balak and Matos Maseh. If you need just 1, it'll be just Matos Maseh and Chukas Balak will be separated. You remember those couple of Mu'aberes years that start with a Hey, that reach Naso before Shavuos instead of Bamidbar? They may not need to combine anything. In all calendars, Nitzavim is right before Rosh Hashanah. That's 7 Shabbos after Tisha B'Av and 7 Sidros later as well. There are 2 Sidros remaining, Vayelech and Hazinu. The Zos HaBracha doesn't count. It's read on Simchas Torah. There's always exactly 1 Shabbos between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Shabbos Shuvah. Is there another one? We don't do the weekly laning on Sukkot, so it would need to be between Yom Kippur and Sukkot. If there is another one, like here, so you do Vayelech on Shabbos Shuvah and Ha'azinu after Yom Kippur. If there isn't, then we're going to have to do Hazinu and Shabbos Shuvah, and Nitzavim V'Yelech will be doubled up before Rosh Hashanah. The last thing that complicates assigning Parshios was Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. There are only 2 Yomim Tovim, with Yom Tov Sheni and Chutz La'aretz, the last day of Pesach and Shavuos. The middle of Pesach and Sukkot, which also have Yom Tov Sheni, don't count. We don't lane the weekly Parsha then anyhow, there are special lanings. So if Shabbos falls on one of these 2 days, Eretz Yisrael will read the weekly Parsha and get a week ahead. The first case is the ones that end with a quote Zion. Remember, the Zion means that Pesach falls on Shabbos, like here. Here and here. If Pesach falls on Shabbos, then the Achron Shel Pesach is also on Shabbos, and Eretz Yisrael is laning and getting ahead. In this case, it'll stay ahead for a long time, all the way till Matos Maseh, the last possible chance to have a double Parsha. Right here. The same thing happens if it ends in a quote Hey. That means if Pesach falls on a Thursday. Also here, here, and here. In those cases, if Pesach falls on a Thursday, then Shavuos, the second day, falls on Shabbos, and again Eretz Yisrael will lane, and not Chutz La'aretz. The civil calendar. The very last thing we need to do is to match up with the civil Gregorian calendar. We are not going to do this in detail. It's interesting that the Kadmonim didn't bother with this at all. The non-Jewish calendar just didn't matter to their society that much. Recently, of course, it has become much more essential. The 2 calendars are not designed to really match up. They run in parallel, the relative positions bouncing back and forth. The Jewish calendar is around 11 days shorter, so Pesach gets earlier. But every few years it adds a whole month to catch up, and Pesach jumps forward again. It averages out. Truth is, they aren't quite the same length either. Let's compare the Gregorian year and our 19-year cycle, also known as Tekufas Rava Ada. The average length of that year with the astronomical average length of a year the mean solar year. So the Gregorian year is just a little bit longer, about half a minute longer per year. But the one from our Luach, the 19-year cycle, which is 235 months we saw before divided by 19, it comes out to be almost 6 minutes longer per year. In the almost 2 millennia since Hillel HaNasi established the Luach, the calendar years have drifted a little more than a week out of sync with the astronomical seasons. Now, why did our sages allow that? We saw they established the length of the month that was accurate to within 1 second of the mean astronomical month. They could have done the same with the year, but that would have made calculating leap years much more complicated. They chose the simpler 19-year cycle and understood that that would be good enough for long enough, get the seasons close enough to fulfill the Torah's requirement that Pesach fall in the spring. Okay, the calculations. As I said, the Kadmonim did not bother with the civil calendar. However, they did explain how to do a related task, how to find the time to start saying the same Talmud Matar in our prayers outside the land of Israel. That is based on the solar calendar, 60 days after the Tekufa, the autumnal equinox. As we saw with the Molad of the moon, they did something similar for the sun, counting forward the right total number of days from the creation of the world. However, to do that, Chazal used the equivalent of the Julian calendar. It's called Tekufas Shmuel. In that calendar, the solar year is approximated by 365 and exactly 1/4 days, a leap year every 4 years. The secular world replaced that with a slightly adjusted Gregorian calendar in 1582. Its rules for leap years are a little more complicated. They also shifted the whole calendar 11 days to bring it back into sync with the actual seasons. When you make those adjustments, you currently end up with December the 4th or the 5th in a civil leap year like 2020 to start saying the same Talmud Matar. From there you can find other days. For instance, January the 1st is 338 days before December the 5th. This year's calendar is now complete. Come back and we can do it again next year. Thank you very much for watching.